Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, respected viewers. I'm sure you must have watched our previous presentations about Quaid's life, and today we are going to present you the fourth episode. The following incidents of Quaid's life would be included in our today's presentation. First is titled as Jinnahs at the governor's house. There was a dinner party in the governor's house, and that incident became very famous. Second is Mrs. Jinnah, her wit, poise and confidence. Third is Ruti and Mr. Jinnah himself, both were honor-bound and kind. The fourth aspect that we will highlight today is Lord Wellington's hubris, overconfidence, Jinnah's principled defiance of the governor of Bombay. Fifth, we shall talk about governor's farewell and Jinnah's retaliation. The town hall meeting resolution, a letter that appeared in the Bombay Chronicle about Mr. Jinnah's principled life and his achievements. And finally, we shall go on to Jinnah's determined stance against the Rollout Act, starting with Jinnah's at the Governor House. Although a relationship between Jinnah and Lord Wellington, the Governor of Bombay, had been far from cordial, yet Jinnah, ranked eminent amongst the notable citizens of Bombay, was sometimes invited to the government house for social events. Bolitho writes, he was invited with his wife to dine at government house. The story is that Mrs. Jinnah wore a low-cut dress that did not please her hostess. That while they were seated at the dining table, Lady Wellington asked an ADC to bring a wrap for Mrs. Jinnah, in case she felt cold. Jinnah took it as an affront. Jinnah is said to have risen and said, when Mrs. Jinnah feels cold, she will say so and ask for a wrap herself. And then he led his wife from the dining room, and from that time refused to go to government house again. Coming on to Mrs. Jinnah's personality, her characteristic wit, poise and confidence. Mrs. Jinnah was a brilliant conversationalist. Her talk sparkled with wit and humor, and she could hold her own against the best in repartee. An interesting anecdote is related that soon after her marriage, she was in Delhi with her husband, who was there in connection with his duties as a member of the Imperial Council. In those days, Lord Chelmsford sat enthroned in the Viceregal Lodge as the Viceroy of India, and he had invited a few distinguished guests to dinner, including Mr. and Mrs. Jinnah. According to protocol of those ancient days, as soon as the ADC announced the arrival of the Viceroy and the Viceroy, the guests stood to attention. Each one walked to the hosts to be presented personally, each lady making an appropriate bow to the Viceroy, and as is customary for the English to do before ladies of the royal family. When Mrs. Jinnah was introduced to the Viceroy and his wife, she saluted them in the manner customary with Muslim women. The ADCs watched exasperated, and the Viceroy turned red under the collar. But the hosts concealed their anger at this rank arrogance, maintaining serenity on the surface. However, as soon as dinner was over and the guests and hosts mixed freely, the Viceroy got Mrs. Jinnah summoned in his presence. Your husband, Mrs. Jinnah, has a great future awaiting him, and you should not mar his chances. You did not greet us in the manner customary at the Viceregal Lodge. In Rome, you must do as the Romans do. Mrs. Jinnah did not flinch. All smiles, she looked straight at the all-powerful Viceroy and said, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, that is exactly what I did. You are in India, and I greeted you the way Indian women do.
We go on to the next incident, and that certainly would show a lot of honor and kindness in the couple that Jinnah and Ruti Bai Petit was. Jinnah was on friendly terms with Lord Reading, the Viceroy of India, who had respect for his talent, integrity, and devotion to public duty. A story goes that Lord Reading tried to tempt Jinnah at first with the judgeship of the High Court and then with the offer of being the law member in the Viceroy's cabinet. He promptly turned down both offers. Later on, Lord Reading sounded him if he would accept knighthood in the following honors list. The Quaid was not a person who could be purchased or be a henchman of the British, the lost leader to his people. He is reported to have said, I prefer to be plain Mr. Jinnah than Sir Muhammad Ali Jinnah. At a social function, Lord Reading asked Mrs. Jinnah if she would not like to be addressed as Lady Jinnah. The lady dashed forth and replied,
If my husband accepts knighthood, I will take a separation from him.
Ratan Bai was a very kind-hearted lady. The incident that I'm going to relate will amply prove as to what I just said. Once she had gone to her tailor's in a highly fashionable shopping district. As soon as she stepped out, she saw a ghatan, that was a Maharata old woman, her legs tottering under the staggering weight of a big basket of bananas that she was carrying on her shoulders. The fruit seller old woman put the basket down with difficulty on the footpath. Just then a white-skinned police officer appeared on the scene and was annoyed to see someone squat outside a fashion shop. Without ceremony, he muttered a curse under his breath and continued to rebuke her in Hindustani. Get away if you have any respect for your body. The bananas scattered about her on the ground. Mrs. Jinnah jumped into the fray, faced the officer and said,
You have no business to behave like this with the public. You better collect all the bananas, put them in her basket, and let her go. Otherwise, I will make you regret this day.
The puzzled officer looked at this unknown but attractive young lady who spoke with the spirit of a suffragette, and with the voice of authority he hastily made amends with the fruit vendor and helped her put the basket on her head again. Mrs. Jinnah walked to the woman and put a 5-rupee note in her hand. Like her husband, she championed the cause of the weak, he stood up against oppression. Now I would narrate to you, my dear viewers, Lord Wellington's hubris, Jinnah's principled defiance, a duel between the Governor of Bombay and Mr. Jinnah. Lord Wellington, known for his arrogance, presiding over the Bombay Provincial Conference held at the Town Hall on 10th of June 1918, said, "There are a certain number of gentlemen, some of whom have considerable influence with the public, many of the members of the political organization called the Home Rule League, whose activities have been such of late years that I cannot honestly feel sure of the sincerity of their support." These derogatory remarks by Lord Wellington led to the exacerbation of relations between Lord Wellington and Jinnah. Jinnah rose to speak. He made a frontal attack on the conduct of Lord Wellington, throttling fair and full discussion. I must say I am pained, very much pained, that His Excellency should have thought it fit to cast doubts on the sincerity and loyalty of the Home Rule League party. I must enter my emphatic protest against that. Lord Wellington expected docility and obedience. He was intolerant of opposition, as is customary with foreign rulers who expect that all must obey. He pulled up the Quaid, saying that he better go and plead all that with the central government. Jinnah reacted sharply and in suitable words, ridiculed the argument of Lord Wellington, saying it was open to anyone of those present to support your opinion in toto or support only such part of the resolution which was acceptable to them, or as for him, he was merely exercising that right which is inherent to all those that participate in discussions, a right that is inalienable to those that sit in a meeting of free men. The Home Rule League, mainly under the inspiration of Jinnah, was determined to have a showdown with Lord Wellington, who had unjustifiably insulted the organization and its leaders. A popular demonstration was arranged when most of the markets and shops were closed, which means Bombay observed Hartal for the first time on a wide scale. Jinnah, my dear viewers, was an excellent strategist and proved to be master of any situation. He got a number of public meetings arranged to educate public opinion about the fight between an arbitrary official and the will of the people. One such protest meeting, B.G. Horniman was the main speaker. He recalled the role played by Edwards, the police commissioner, in trying to break up the Muslim League session in Bombay. About Lord Wellington's dual policy of reprimanding that police officer in public and in private supporting the same man for breaking up the league session, and about the great and courageous role played by that eminent citizen, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, in fighting without flinching the entire might of bureaucracy. Now we come to, my dear viewers, Governor's farewell party and Jinnah's retaliation to the farewell event that had been planned by some of his followers. Finally, the fateful day came, 11th December 1918. The Governor of Bombay was to retire. A meeting of the citizens of Bombay was called in the town hall to accord farewell to the outgoing and supposedly popular Governor of Bombay. Jinnah and his colleagues, having taken over places from their friends in the queues, were among the first ones to enter the hall, full 7 hours before the meeting was scheduled to commence. His newly wedded wife was besides him, fighting for a popular public cause with the unflinching passion of a suffragette. The 0 hour for the fight to start had arrived. The Sheriff of Bombay entered the hall ceremoniously to be appropriately greeted by Europeans, Anglo-Indians and government flunkies who were jam-packed on the dais and the front rows, and to be booed by anti-Wellingtonians. No, no was the response by the protesters led by Jinnah to all that President of the meeting, Sir G.G. Bhoy, rose to say or explain. Quaid was among those who were assaulted by the police, and he was not the one who would forget this insult or to forgive the police or Lord Wellington. As soon as the protesters led by Jinnah emerged out of the town hall, a surging mass of humanity, shouting adulatory slogans, rushed towards them, carrying the brave leaders on their shoulders. Jinnah announced to the admiring crowd that a protest meeting would be held that night. At the protest meeting that night, Jinnah said, "Gentlemen, you are citizens of Bombay. You have today scored a great triumph of democracy. Your triumph today has made it clear that even the combined forces of bureaucracy and autocracy could not overawe you. December the 11th is a red-letter day in the history of Bombay. Gentlemen, go and rejoice over the day that has secured us the triumph of democracy." The resolution that was passed at the town hall protest meeting, at this meeting a resolution was unanimously passed protesting against the conduct of the Sheriff of Bombay and against the disgraceful behavior in refusing the oppositionists to address the town hall meeting. The resolution passed scathing strictures against the police and concluded with the words, "The meeting of the citizens of Bombay condemns the administration of Lord Wellington and protests against the proposal to raise any sort of memorial to Lord Wellington for his services." Sayyid Hussain, while supporting the resolution, singled out Muhammad Ali Jinnah as the embodiment of the spirit of the citizens of Bombay, of whom not only his city, but the whole of India was proud. So later in this very connection, a letter in the Bombay Chronicle appeared. B.D. Lamb wrote a letter in Bombay Chronicle suggesting, if as a result of the meeting anybody deserves a memorial, it is Mr. Jinnah, whose fine leadership and fearless courage have marked a great epoch in the public life of Bombay. He has shown the spirit of our late lamented leaders like Dada Bhai Nauroji and Gopal Krishna Gokhale. The letter said this: "We should mark our great appreciation," the letter went on, "of Mr. Jinnah's services by raising a fund in which each of his supporters should contribute 1 rupee. That rupee will come not from a man's pocket, but from his heart. If we had our own way, we would raise a statue of Mr. Jinnah to be placed in the town hall of Bombay. For Mr. Jinnah has forever laid low the tyranny of town hall meetings held in the name of the public. His name will be cherished forever as the great Indian who stood for the rights of the people. Town halls in every city are symbols of their true public spirit. The spirit never existed in Bombay, but Mr. Jinnah has established it on firm basis in yesterday's proceedings." Lamb's appeal received enthusiastic support, and rupees poured in their thousands from all over Bombay city and even from far-off cities like Karachi and Calcutta. Out of this incessant dribbling in of single rupees, a huge amount was collected. And so soon, Jinnah's People Memorial Hall was built in Bombay to commemorate the occasion when Jinnah so successfully led that city to make officialdom out to insult the public, to lick the dust of defeat and humiliation. Jinnah was in England on the day the opening ceremony of this hall was performed by Mrs. Sarojini Naidu, who made an eloquent and poetic speech typical of her public utterances, eulogizing Jinnah's services to his city and his country. After the opening ceremony, Mrs. Naidu sent a telegram to Jinnah, which read, "A prophet is honored in his own country and in his own time." Jinnah's determined stance against Rowlatt Act. Imperial British got introduced in the Council an amendment in the Criminal Law Act, leading to the hated Rowlatt Act, empowering the government to assume extraordinary powers to deal with political agitations. The most outspoken speech in the Imperial Council condemning this medieval and retrograde measure was made by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who in the course of this debate on the bill said, "My first ground is that it is against the fundamental principle of law and justice, namely that no man should lose his liberty or be deprived of his liberty without a judicial trial in accordance with the accepted rules of evidence and procedure. My next ground is that the powers which are going to be assumed by the executive, which means substitution of executive for judicial, such powers are likely to be abused. And in the past we have instances where such powers have been abused. My last ground is that there is no precedent or parallel that I know of in any other civilized country where you have laws of this character enacted." Jinnah's vigorous opposition against the Rowlatt Bill stamped him as a leader, uncompromising in his principles, steadfast in his love for the people, however difficult the odds that faced him. Jinnah the constitutionalist wrote an open letter to the Viceroy on 28th March 1919 against anti-people's bills which the government was rushing through in the Imperial Council. "Your Excellency, the passing of the Rowlatt Bill by the Government of India and the assent given to it by Your Excellency as Governor General against the will of the people has severely shaken the trust reposed by them in British justice. I therefore, as a protest against the passing of the bill and the manner in which it was passed, tender my resignation as a member of the Imperial Legislative Council. For I feel that under the prevailing conditions, I can be of no use to my people in the Council, nor consistently with one's self-respect, possibly cooperate with a government that shows such utter disregard for the opinion of the representatives of the people in the council chamber, or for the feelings and sentiments of the people outside. In my opinion, a government that passes or sanctions such a law in times of peace forfeits its claim to be called a civilized government, and I still hope that the Secretary of State for India, Mr. Montague, will advise His Majesty to signify his disallowance to this black act. Yours truly, M.A. Jinnah. His resignation from the Imperial Council proved, if proof was needed, that Jinnah valued above everything else his self-respect and the esteem of his people. A practical man, he lodged his protest in a constitutional manner and withdrew his cooperation from a government that seemed to have no regard and respect for popular opinion. Dear viewers, I hope that you listened to today's presentation with interest, and a lot of the qualities of Mr. Jinnah, Mrs. Jinnah, as a leading couple of Bombay, were manifested in this presentation. Both were honor-bound, both were very kind, and both were fearless and defiant in their outlook on life. And then you also saw what Mr. Jinnah could do in the public forum, his retaliation against the governor of Bombay, and likewise his opposition to the Rowlatt Act would have more than clarified to you the kind of role that Mr. Jinnah always played on the Indian political stage. Thank you very much.